Desperate workers return to the idea of unionization, but this time is different. For the first time in American history to speak of, the federal government has their back. The decline of immigration, which begins with World War I, and then through the 1920s, there's significant restriction on immigration, and then in the 1930s, with the Great Depression, very few people are migrating. This eases ethnic differences. Most workers are first generation now. Most speak English and have adopted some or the majority of American cultural institutions and ideas. Factories were run like little dictatorships. They beat workers, fired them at will, had total control over the hours and speed the factory would work at. And local governments were beholden to these wealthy business owners. In the 1930s, workers began demanding an end to the arbitrary power of their bosses. They wanted civil liberties, they wanted the right to picket, they wanted to distribute union literature, and they wanted to have grievance meetings. The Secretary of Labor, remember this is a woman, Frances Perkins, is pro-labor. Workers would write to Perkins and FDR describing themselves as slaves of the Depression, talking about the terrible and inhuman conditions they worked under, and demanding the political liberty which our forefathers fought, which had been made meaningless by economic inequality. They talked of industrial despotism. In 1934, 2,000 workers went on. There were 2,000 strikes, Many of these ended violently. In Toledo, when 10,000 auto workers went on strike and ended up in a 7-hour battle with scabs, that's replacement workers, cops, and the National Guard. In Minnesota, a 4-month strike by truck drivers turned into a pitched battle in the streets that ended in martial law in that area. San Francisco had a general strike, the first since Seattle's in 1919. The general strike is when people in all industries throughout the town go on strike. Not everybody and not every industry, but generally people are on strike. This was started by dock workers demanding their union be recognized. 400,000 textile workers from the Northeast to the Deep South also demanded union recognition. Toledo, Minnesota, and San Francisco all gave some concessions, but as you will see, which will be a trend, the Southern strikers failed. The Congress of Industrial Organizations, which was created in 1935, is a union for unskilled workers. The American Federation of Labor was for skilled workers and was divided by craft, what skill you had. The CIO was divided by industry. Its leader was the United Mine Workers president, John L. Lewis. And their goal was economic freedom and industrial democracy. They demanded a fair share of the profits and a voice in the conditions in which they worked. In December of 1936, the United Auto Workers and the CIO engaged in a sit-down strike, which, by the way, had been an old wobbly tactic. 7,000 workers showed up to work in Cleveland to the factory and then simply refused to work. This was effective because it shut the factory down because the workers were in there so that you couldn't really replace them without using violence to get them out. This spread to the factories in Flint, Michigan. Local police were sent in to attack the workers, but the workers fought them off. Michigan had a Democratic governor by then who had been elected with the help of the CIO, and when he was asked to send the state National Guard in to shoot the workers, he refused. Strikers cleaned the plants, maintained the machinery, set up a little local government, prepped meals, had labor song concerts. Their wives would bring in food. They made a palace of what had been their prison, one observer said. On February 11, 1936, GM starts negotiations. Ford, who hated unions, would hold out until 1941. But by the end of 1937, there's 400,000 workers in the United Auto Workers, who would become one of the strongest unions in this country. Steel workers, who had been some of the victims of some of the organized labor's biggest losses, like the Homestead strike, threatened a sit-down strike versus U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel caves in March of 1937 and recognizes the union when they realize the state or national government is not going to shoot the workers for them. But the smaller steel companies, who were called Little Steel, held out. When the Steel Workers Union had a Memorial Day picnic celebrating their win over U.S. Steel, the Little Steel workers paid the cops to go attack them. 10 workers are killed by the police, who were pretending to be police but were really serving as mercenaries for the corporations. By 1940, there's 9 million American unions. That's double what it was just 10 years earlier in 1930. Unions meant workers could, quote, go to our bosses and talk to them like men instead of like slaves. Unions get a say in management. They get to negotiate on the pace of technology or pace of work and new technology introduced. They get a formal grievance process, a say in hiring and firing and promotions. The CIO and the unstabilized labor and gave dignity and freedom to those people working. The CIO pushed for public housing, universal health care, unemployment, and old age insurance. They argued the Great Depression was created by income inequality and a lack of demand because workers weren't paid enough. Governors and unions, they said, must, quote, create a consumer's demand. And this became the general theory of how economics works. In 1913, United Auto Workers and GM agreed to the rate of pay commensurate with an American standard of living. Underconsumption, that is a lack of demand, becomes the dominant interpretation of the Great Depression as well as other economic downturns. And the solution to this, of course, were that workers get a higher percentage of the national income.